Other thoughts? Okay. All right, next. All right. Course 32, schools can discipline students for their misbehavior off of school grounds if it has a connection, an impact on the educational process of the school. Now, one of the current genres of these type of cases has to do with online websites, MySpace, Facebook, those types of things where kids are getting on and putting on derogatory things about students or teachers. And the question has become, can schools punish those students for that kind of behavior? Well, it depends. It depends on, has this had a negative impact, okay, on the educational process of the school? If the kid just did it on their own time, it hasn't created any problems at school, it wasn't done at school, it wasn't, no school resources were used to create it. There have been cases where the courts have said, you can't discipline a kid for that. That's within their First Amendment rights. Okay? But the reverse is true if it has an impact at school. Okay?
Would that be considered a form of libel or slander if it was used from a teacher, or because if it's online and they're having these derogatory comments, that could also be harassment or aggression. I mean, it's more than just school law. It could be public law.
There's an assistant principal in Texas that is doing that right now, suing a couple kids for having put up a MySpace website that was very derogatory toward her. And she's alleging libel, because it was written, okay, and intentional infliction of emotional distress in that case. Okay? But that's a private action, okay? That's a private action, and which is going to be different than what the school can do in terms of their discipline.
My other question, when we're just talking about, could we consider it bullying? Because a lot of our schools have zero tolerance for bullying, and if they're spreading rumors or even saying things that are true about other students on these things, that's not on school grounds, but that's bullying these other students. And as you said, it would affect them at school, I would think. Things would be whispered at school or whatever. What would you do? How do you handle that?
Well, MySpace now has got a procedure by which administrators work with that organization to get those things taken down immediately. That'd be the first thing that I'd want to do. But and specifically, the three areas are, any kind of threats, any kind of harassment or bullying. They're very willing now to work with administrators. So, yeah, it's the same thing as if they did it on school property. If you can show the connection to the school, it's just like they did it in the library. What's that?
They wouldn't know these kids if they weren't in school together. And so the connection is to school, even if it's not on school grounds.
And there are a multitude of cases that are coming up through the courts right now where those actions are being litigated, and the courts have ruled, yes, schools, you're perfectly within your rights, to discipline students under those circumstances, just as you would if there were a fight across the street from the school. Okay, is that going to impact the educational process? Absolutely. Well, if there's a fight down at the bus stop, well, it's off school property. Well, too bad. It's still going to impact our educational. So the principle remains the same. It's just the technology has changed a little bit. Okay, but the same principle is going to apply. Yes.
What if in these instances, whether it's verbal or aggression, you come down on these kids or you talk to them and try to remedy the situation and they say, oh, well, we were just playing, we were just kidding around.
It's going to be a fact question. It would be the same thing as if it had happened right in the school. And that's probably the same thing. That's probably the same thing they're going to say if I went to them right in the school. And it's become a fact question, and probably my response is going to remain quite similar, depending on what I find out, what I believe to be the case. If this is just messing around, then all right, maybe we talk about a warning this first time. Okay, you apologize to the kid, but understand that it should happen again. We're going to have some other consequences for you to consider. Right? Okay? Other thoughts on that? All right. Okay. Okay, this is the case about, this is the Giles case, which is actually being heard by the Supreme Court here in another month or so. How many of you heard about the Morris v. Frederick case? Bet you did. Yeah, that's the Bong Hits for Jesus case. Anyone heard about that? Okay. This is a companion case related to student free speech. Okay. This kid wore a T-shirt to school that was critical of the president. It said GWB World Domination Tour. It had little lines of cocaine. It had a martini glass. Called him a chicken hawk, etc. Okay. The school disciplined him, and now this has worked its way up to the Supreme Court level. The key part of this is that there was no disruption of the school environment. There was no disruption. Now, the issue the court's going to have to consider is, what about the marijuana joints, the cocaine on it? And I think that what they're going to say in the Bong Hits for Jesus case, which is going to be that schools do have the right to control an anti-drug message. Okay? In other words, if students are advocating drug use, that can be controlled. All right? In this case, the reason I put true-false is if there's a disruption of the learning environment, pursuant to the Tinker case, the armband case, that you may remember from the 1960s. Kids wore armbands to school to protest the war. Well, they got disciplined for it. They were suspended. And the court said, hey, you can't do that. Kids do not shed their constitutional rights at the schoolhouse gate. And therefore, they're entitled to wear those armbands as long as there's not a disruption of the learning environment. Okay? All right. That's where you send the kid to the office and say, Mr. Administrator, this is why you get paid the big bucks. Handle this deal. Okay? All right. How about 33? What do I have an asterisk up there? Again, it has to do with as long as it doesn't disrupt the school day. Students, it's not a problem for students to gather in the morning to pray, or if they want to hold a Bible study session. As long as it's not disruptive, it's not a problem. And of course, you can offer a course on world religions as long as you're not using it to promote a particular viewpoint. Okay? What's the significance of IEP and LRE? Well, IEP is the law. Once that team gets together and decides this is the plan for this particular kid, there may be some accommodations incorporated in that plan that require regular education teachers to do some things, okay, outside of the ordinary. That's not negotiable. Okay? Once that IEP is set in stone, then regular education teachers must abide by that program. And the least restrictive environment, that's significant for all of us because that leads to what we know now as what? What's the terminology that we may be using when we talk about least restrictive environment? Yeah. Inclusion. Very good. Another synonym for that is mainstreaming. Okay? And so because the law requires special ed students to be placed in the least restrictive environment, it may be that you're going to experience sometime in your career a special needs student in your classroom, okay, that may not be functioning at the same level as the other students. Okay? But because of this provision in the law, you've got to go along with those accommodations. Okay?